Hey everyone, I'm Joe Zealand, and today I'm going to show you how you can play Coldplay / The Chainsmokers, something just like this, on acoustic guitar. If you're familiar with the official studio recording, you probably know that there's not an acoustic guitar, or at least not an audible one, on that recording. That being said though, there are still a few live acoustic versions of the song floating around, and they actually have different tunings, so I'll walk you through those different tunings, but I'll also show you another way how you can play the song on acoustic guitar, and that is the way that I personally prefer to play the song. The first time I became aware of any sort of acoustic version of this song was from a concert of Coldplay in 2022, where Chris, just on acoustic guitar, performed the song with a children's choir. And in that performance, Chris has the acoustic guitar tuned to one of his favorite tunings, one of his most used tunings, which is E, A, D, G, B. So the top 5 strings, standard tuning, but then you want to tune your E string down to a D. And in that specific performance, Chris uses only 3 chords. Starting out on a G major, actually the way we play it is a G5, but it works as a G major played like this. Middle finger on the 3rd fret of the low E string. Then with the same finger you want to mute the A string. Open D, open G, ring finger on the 3rd fret of the D string, and open E/D. If you want to, you can also put your ring finger on the 2nd fret of the B string, and then you have 0 muted strings. You have a full chord played on 6 strings. You can also, which Chris does a lot, instead of playing 3rd fret on the E string with your middle finger, you can also play it with your thumb. Second chord is an A sus4. If you don't want to play the low E string, you want to start with the A string, open A string. Ring finger on the 2nd fret of the D string. Middle finger on the 2nd fret of the G string. Again, ring finger stays on the 3rd fret of the B string. And open D. And actually, you want to keep your ring finger on the 3rd fret of the B string for all 3 chords. Final chord, B minor 7. Again, we want to start on the A string, don't play the low E string. 2nd fret on the A string with your index finger. Open D. We keep our middle finger on the 2nd fret of the G string from that A chord. And again, ring finger on the 3rd fret of the B string. And open D. Now let's look at the general rhythm, and for that purpose we want to keep that one specific live version on the side for now and just look at the general rhythm that the studio recording implies. So I'm going to play that rhythm for you first and then we'll break it down. Also note that I prefer to play the chords a little differently in terms of fingering compared to how Chris plays it in that live version, so don't get distracted by that. I just prefer to have my pinky finger on the 3rd fret of the B string. Maybe you can tell already, your strumming hand just does constant downstrokes in quaver notes. And now the only slightly tricky part is where the chord transitions happen. I'm going to count along to it once again in quaver notes, and you want to pay special attention to where that switch to the A sus4 chord happens. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Maybe you could already tell from my counting, but you want to play that A sus4 on the 3 and that's it. Okay, bye. Just kidding, we're not done yet. I mean, technically we are, because that is the whole song. But since there is no official acoustic version, we can embellish this arrangement a little bit. So, for starters, in the studio version there's actually one more chord, and that is in the bridge that comes in after the 2nd chorus, which is a D major over F sharp. So for that chord you want to start with your thumb on the 2nd fret of the low E string. And then you can either mute the A string or play it. It doesn't change the quality of the chord. And then it's open D, index finger on the 2nd fret of the G string, ring finger on the 3rd fret of the B string, open high E string. Alright, another variation that I like to do is play that G5/G major chord a little differently, and I actually prefer to play it as a G add 9 chord, I guess. And if we go to the original finger position that I showed you at the beginning, you just want to add your index finger to the 2nd fret on the G string. And like that, you constantly have the same 3/2 notes on the 3 high strings, which is A, D, and D. Another thing that I like to do is play that harmony variation throughout the entire song. Another thing, I like to play that chord a little differently. So this is the chord that I've already shown you, but I think it sounds a little more dramatic to play like this. Another thing, the rhythm. As I explained already, the rhythm is very, very, very straightforward. The thing with that is, I think it doesn't make for a particularly good acoustic guitar only version of the song. So we can kind of stack different rhythms to make it a little more interesting. You want to start out just with single chords. And the myths, Achilles and his gold, Achilles and his gifts, Spider-Man's control, and so on and so on. Once we enter that pre-chorus, we can add a little more rhythm. Where'd you wanna go? How much you wanna risk? I'm not looking for somebody, some superhuman gifts, some superhero, some fairy tale bliss, just something I can turn to, somebody I can kiss. I want something just like this. And then potentially we want to build up to that chorus. Oh, I want something just like this. Recently I saw another acoustic performance of the song, again just Chris on acoustic guitar with a couple of children again. The whole vibe of the video was, to me at least, clearly that it's an improvised performance of the song, and in that performance Chris didn't even tune the high E string down to D, it's actually just straight up in standard tuning. And from the short clip I've seen, Chris actually just uses these 3 chords. So this guitar now is in standard tuning. So you constantly want to use your thumb, starting out on the 3rd fret of the low E string, then ring finger on the 5th fret of the A string, pinky finger on the 5th fret of the D string, middle finger on the 4th fret of the G string, and index finger on the 3rd fret of the D string. And then you want to keep that chord and just move it up 2 frets for every finger. So 5, 7, 7, 6, 5. For the final chord, there are kind of 2 versions of it. The more complex version is this one. So we still have this shape using the same exact fingers, but just 7, 9, 9. Then you want to have your index finger on the 7th fret of the G string, and your middle finger on the 7th fret of the B string. It's a little awkward to play, admittedly, but you can simplify it and just play it like this. And once again, if you want to include that F sharp chord, you can take this shape, 7, 9, 9, 7, open strings, and move it to 2, 4, 4, 2. And finally, here's the way that I personally prefer to play the song, and it's yet again another tuning. It's not the first tuning that I showed you today, nor is it standard tuning, but it's a tuning that in my opinion makes for the easiest way to play the song. E, A, D, and G, standard tuning, but then you want to tune the B string down to an A, and again high E string down to D. The main riff I play like this. And finally, there is still a simpler way to play the chords. Check this out. I also want to advocate for this tuning because, in my opinion, this is the only tuning where you can actually play that tiny piano riff that comes in the bridge / post second chorus part. That being said though, even in this tuning, it's still pretty tricky to play. It's finger picked because it's an arpeggio riff. I'm gonna play it roughly at the original tempo and then I'll play it slowly. And yeah, it's just a tiny little bonus thing that if you personally actually want to perform the song, you might want to consider including that part. You can also just continue playing the chords, potentially include that one chord variation that actually occurs in the studio recording. But yeah, if you do want to play that arpeggio piano riff, here's how you can do it in this exact tuning. So, when I initially shot the tutorial, I completely forgot to mention one part, and it so happens to be the part where we have an entirely different harmony, and that is the crescendo part that leads into the guitar solo. So I went ahead and recorded this very overdubbed narration, which you're listening to right now, and obviously the guitar part that's coming up. First, I'm going to show you a simple way to play that part, and that is with power chords. The nice thing about that is that it works in all the tunings I've shown you, since we really only need the low E and A string, with the D string potentially implied as well. But yeah, you can play it like that in all three tunings. If you want more open, full chords, using all 6 strings, I'm going to show you how to play it in my preferred tuning for the song, so E, A, D, G, A, D. Check the description and the comments though. I've also written out chord arrangements for the other 2 tunings as well. Also note that while the chord sequence in the guitar solo part at the end is basically the same as the main sequence I've shown you, you do want to switch out one chord, and that is the 4th chord, the A sus4 shape, and you want to switch it out for a D major. Everything else stays the same, but I've still decided to include one round of that in the following clip as well. that's it. Thanks for bearing with me. I know, pretty long-winded explanations for such a simple song. I mean, that's the irony of it. The simpler the song, the more space there is for creativity and variation. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions about this song, about the different versions that I've just shown you. Thanks again for all your support throughout the years, your continued support. I really appreciate it. I'm always happy to read your comments and answer your questions and respond to requests. So yeah. Thank you so much, I really appreciate it, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Joe Zealand, out.